Good morning. Welcome to our 8th webinar in this series on Horizon Europe. My name is Agnieszka Wejna and I will be your moderator for today. I would like to note that before we start, it is my honor to give the floor to the Ambassador of the European Union to Canada, Madame Geneviève Tutz, to offer us opening remarks.
You're just muted, Ambassador.
Voilà, c'est beaucoup mieux comme ça. So thank you very much, Agnieszka. And bonjour à toutes et à tous à travers tout le Canada. I'm very happy today to open this webinar on Horizon Europe Consortia, organized by the EU delegation here in Ottawa in partnership with ICET Canada. I would like to thank all of you for being here with us, the speakers, of course, but also the members of my team who organized this webinar. The EU delegation has been very active since the early days of association in promoting Horizon Europe to Canadian stakeholders. Our objective has been to help Canadian researchers and companies reap the full benefits of association to Pillar 2 of Horizon Europe. And I can assure you that we have put a lot of enthusiasm in this endeavor. And for a good reason. Let me remind you that Pillar 2 aims at tackling global challenges, such as achieving climate neutrality, boosting the use of trustworthy artificial intelligence, or supporting healthcare's resilience. So today's webinar is the first of a series of outreach activities following the publication of the new Horizon Europe work program last December. The work program covers 2026 and 2027 and allocates significant funding, 14 billion euro, meaning 22.5 billion Canadian dollars for the 2 years. It's also simpler and less prescriptive than the previous one. And I'm sure that this will make some of you very happy, because simplification has been a constant request from all our stakeholders. So the webinars aims at giving advice on how to form successful consortia. As Horizon Europe is about collaborative research, this is a crucial element of the project. A good team has more chance to achieve a successful outcome. I would also like to inform you that 2 further webinars will follow, one in February about the management of grant agreements and one in March on proposal evaluations. We are also planning a roadshow around Canada in the next months, as we receive so positive feedback from last year's edition. So we will give you more details about this activity in the coming weeks. And let me maybe conclude with a word of encouragement, as some calls of the work program are already open. Take your chance and apply. It is in your hands to turn ground-breaking research into the solutions that will define our future. Thank you very much, and I wish you a very successful and clear webinar. Thank you, Agnieszka. The floor is yours again.
Thank you, Ambassador. So now we are moving to the clue of the program, and I hope it will be a learning experience for all of us. But before we start, I want to give some housekeeping remarks. So first of all, as usual, you can ask the questions in the Q&As as we go. We will try to answer them during the webinar. We have here the representatives from ICET as well. So we hope to be able to cover a broad range of questions. Then, number two, in today's presentation by Maria, we are using more interactive tools. So keep your phones ready because there will be Slido engagement in there. Also, this webinar is in English only. Alors, vous pouvez cliquer sur le bouton Closed Captions et sélectionner la traduction en français. Then my last point is that I will paste into our chat the link to post event survey. And please fill it in because we need to hear from you about your experience to offer better and more tailored webinars in the future. So now, without further ado, I would like to introduce and to ask to the floor our first speaker, Tamara Sone, whom you probably all know by now, who is the National Contact Point Coordinator for Horizon Europe at Innovation, Science, Economic Development Canada. Tamara, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Agnieszka. It's wonderful to be part of this this event, and we enjoy working very much. I'm the National Contact Point Coordinator for Canada. I work at Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada as part of Canada's Horizon Europe Secretariat, and we've been working very closely with the EU delegation on a wide variety of projects, including the roadshow as well as the webinars. So thank you for including me today in the event. I'm sure it will be very interesting to hear what Maria has to say. But before I get started, I would like to acknowledge that living in the Ottawa-Gatineau region, I'm on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I wish also to recognize that we work in different locations, and therefore you're probably working on different Indigenous lands that have been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. The Indigenous peoples are the traditional stewards of the lands and waters where each of us are meeting today. I encourage you to take a moment to think about which territory you are on today. Next slide, please. So before we get started, I just want to mention that there are new work programs. So the 26-27 work program was released back in December. The first calls have opened in January, and there's opportunities for international collaboration across 6 clusters. So in addition to the calls, I also want to mention that we can access what they refer to as sometimes sensitive calls or restricted calls. These are calls in areas of artificial intelligence, robotics, quantum, and space. And we've opening up even more opportunities for Canada-EU collaboration. The list of these calls that are specifically open to Canadians are listed on Canada's Horizon Europe website. I want to caution, though, that there are a few calls that are not open to Canadians. They are only open to EU member states or EEA members, but the majority of these calls for under Horizon Europe are open to Canadians, and I encourage you to go to our website to find out more information. Next slide, please. So, as part of the Horizon Europe Secretariat, we have a network of national contact points, which are located across the departments and agencies of the federal government of Canada. These national contact points, where the list of these national contact points are again on the ICED Horizon Europe website, provide guidance, information, and assistance. We share best practices and information with European and international national contact points. We also connect Canadian researchers and innovators with global partners. The Horizon Europe Secretariat and the NCPs can help you find partners and collaborators and help you find that consortium to build that successful proposal. So in Since Association, we have organized matchmaking events, worked with the EU delegation for technical webinars, as well as some technical webinars with the EU partners. Next slide, please. If you haven't already, we would recommend that you sign up for our newsletter, which can be signed up through the Horizon Europe website. Please, and in addition, our contact information is on this slide as well. If you have any questions about the program, we're here to help. Please contact the Horizon Europe inbox at Horizon Europe at ised-esed.gc.ca. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to make this presentation. Agnieszka, over to you.
Thank you, Tamara. So now, without further ado, I want to invite Maria Pawłowska, our expert on everything Horizon, but today specifically the expert on the Horizon work program and the proposal writing. She will tell us more how to actually work in partnership with other organizations and how to introduce yourself or create successful consortia. Thank you, and please, Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Agi. Thank you, Tamara, and to the ambassador for the great introduction. And I get to not have to introduce the topic because you have done such a great job of it. And I will just make my way over to my presentation immediately. Just give me a... Okay, looks like it's all working. So we will talk today about consortia building. So the first thing I'd like to do, as Agi has said, we'd like to ask you a question about what do you think when you hear consortium building for Horizon Europe? What are some of the words that come to mind, or just a single word? If you'd like to answer on your phone, there's a Slido link right there. We'd be really interested just to get a poll of the virtual room we're in. So I'll give you a few minutes. This is starting to look, this is great. I was honestly, okay, I don't want to skew the results. I'll give you all time to keep typing away. Thank you for participating. Okay, so it looks like people are finishing up, but there are still people joining. Maybe 20 more seconds then. Okay, I think we're starting to see a pattern here. I'm really, honestly, I'm glad to see collaboration comes out as the biggest word there. And networking, there's networking, partnership, there's teamwork, international collaboration. These are all great. And I'm so glad that they're jumping out at us. That there is also obviously complex, challenging, complicated. So I was wondering what the relationship between those is going to be, because I realize, I mean, I've talked to people all over Canada at this point. I've worked in Europe on this for well over a decade. It's not perhaps, the easiest thing one does as part of their job is trying to put these together. But yes, at the very core of it, the whole idea is collaboration. It is innovation, partnership, and collaboration. And it can be a bit daunting. We've got that word as well. There's even a very specific question: what % Canadian versus European? That's a really good question, and we'll kind of get to that in a sec. So this is, I don't know that how some of you who haven't replied feel about this, but I really think this is quite a good poll of people's feelings about this, not just in Canada, just anywhere really where we're working on Horizon Europe. It is Horizon Europe is new in Canada, but the challenges are honestly not unique. There is a learning curve, but everywhere where we work on Horizon Europe, we come across some of the same challenges that we're going to try and address here. I can see there are people still typing. Thank you so much. I'll give you another chance to engage in a much simpler question this time, just to get a poll of the room. Have you taken part in assembling a consortium for Horizon Europe? This one's easy. You don't have to type anything. Just scan that and press the one thing. And just so we can get a feel for. Okay, I can see people are still answering. I'd encourage you. We're getting to almost half of the people in the room answering the question. So this is, dare I say, statistically significant for the purposes of this webinar. Okay, this is great. Like literally, almost half of you in the room have told us. And so I think what we can see clearly is that most of you have not taken part in assembling a consortium for Horizon Europe, which is, to be honest, expected because, again, Canada is what is nicely called in Brussels English a newcomer to the program. And we would expect most of you to not have had perhaps a lot of experience with this program. What we want to do with these webinars and all the other activities that are happening through the EU delegation or ISED or the trade commissioners is to encourage you to take that step because it's so worth it for so many reasons. If, we've done a lot of these webinars, all these reasons are there, that there'll be more webinars explaining that to you. But as we can see, most of you haven't done this. So but then almost a fifth of you have. So those of you who have will have to bear with me. Perhaps some of my advice will not be as useful. And hopefully to those of you who have never really tried or maybe tried and haven't done this or are thinking of doing this, hopefully what I say in the next, however, half an hour or just a bit more will be useful to get you started on that road. Because this is, honestly what we want to do. We know Horizon Europe can be daunting. I mean, the work programs are literal hundreds of pages long, right? If you just download the file and look at it, that can be daunting. Daunting is a great word there. So what we want to do is we want to give you some tools and some very concrete tips and advice to help you make that first step and get the ball rolling, so to speak. So let's just start with, what are consortia? This is not a word many of us probably necessarily use in our everyday life. Honestly, outside of Horizon Europe, conversations, I don't know that it's a word I ever use, right? Team is a word we might use, just talking to our kid about their sports team. Consortium is a very specific EU consortium Brussels word. But what it really means is project team, right? There's not much more to it. That's what it is. It's the people or the application team that we hope will result in being the project team. So it's consortium singular, consortia plural. You will hear that word all the time. It just means, the kind of, I hope I'm not infringing some sort of trademark, but it's the Avengers Assemble kind of thing. You want to get all the people together and all the best people, all the best organizations you can think of, you want to get them together for a project team. In terms of technicalities, you need minimum 3 organizations from EU and associated countries, minimum 1 from the EU, right? So Canada is an associated country. You've ticked the box. You need at least 1 more EU country. You've got 27 to pick from. It's, there's a lot of them at this point. And you need 1 more associated or EU country. And again, Horizon Europe, the name implies, the continent of Europe, but it's very much not that anymore. Just recently, Japan has associated. South Korea is associated. New Zealand is associated, right? There is so many countries that you can reach out to, partners from so many countries that fulfill even that association criterion. Additionally, all low and middle income countries are eligible for funding. for basically having their way paid through the program, right? So that brings the number to well over 100. So there's really, it's a global program at this point. This is in the news recently, that Australian academics, the top universities in Australia, have actually put out an open letter asking the government to consider associating to Horizon Europe because they're worried they're missing out. It's a club that everyone else is in, a table everyone else is sitting at, that is doing this kind of research, and they want in on it, right? So honestly, other than Australia and the US, there are so many associated, that a lot of the countries you might want to be thinking of working with are probably in one way or another part of the club already. What's important to know is that the minimum is 3 countries or 3 organizations from 3 countries for a consortium, that's an important the important difference, right? This is an institutional program. An institution is based in a given country. It doesn't matter if you're working, say, with a French institution and the academic you're working with is, say, American. That does not matter. What matters is where their institution is. And that the person you're working with is obviously legally working in the country that they're working in, but we will assume as much. So what matters is institutional address, not the nationalities of the people you're working with. Same in Canada. It doesn't matter who it is that's actually going to be on the team, right? What matters is the institution is based in Canada. So moving on, it is usually 3. It's a minimum of 3 countries. It is usually way, way more than that. There are project teams that are 27, 30 partners. You rarely, honestly, see fewer than half a dozen nowadays, and half a dozen is really quite small. It depends on the project, but half a dozen is not a small number. It's not a big number. So I sometimes talk to people and they're like, okay, so we need 2 more countries. If we're a Canadian organization, we need organizations from 2 more countries. I'm like, technically yes, but chances are that you need a lot more. And we'll get to why as you build the consortium, but this is really just the very minimum of what's required. And this is just a really good place to reiterate. This is something that I try to tell people, whenever I get a chance to. So again, I apologize to those of you who have already heard me go on and on about this, but what's really important with Horizon Europe, and that is different from most other funding we have available in Canada, is that if you're doing an RIA, and you will see if the call is an RIA or an IA or a CSA, you will see that in the basic information about the call in the work program. So an RIA stands for a research and innovation action, and any entity that is taking part in an RIA has 100% of their way paid through the project, right? And that includes payroll. That's really important because it's very different from obviously a lot of Canadian funding, and we're seeing that Canadian-based institutions are not applying for payroll in applications. And that just to be really honest with you, that looks a little weird for want of a better, well, there are better words, but it does to evaluators on the European end, not asking for money for the people who are actually going to be doing their work to pay them, so effectively for payroll, is honestly not what they're expecting. The standard is you will ask for money to pay the people doing the work, right? Not just for equipment and the rest of it, but for the actual money. There is a policy statement from the EU which clearly says a lot of the idea behind Horizon Europe and these programs is funding people to do really good work on really exciting topics, right? And you literally fund the people, not just the organizations. So everyone in RIA, including for-profits. So if you run a business and you're a partner in a Horizon Europe RIA project, then you get 100% of your project costs funded, including payroll. If you're a not-for-profit or a research institution, so not-for-profits can include, municipal entities, NGOs, anything, or a research institution. In an innovation action, you also have 100% of your way paid through the program. However, if you are a for-profit business in an innovation action, which is a higher TRL, so closer to market, it is only 70% of your way paid through it. And the way the European Commission sees it is they don't want to distort free market processes by funding something that is so close to being on the market, funding it in its entirety. So that is why it's only 70% there. So where do I start in terms of Horizon Europe Consortia? Now, this is a very, very simple graph, but what I really want to show on this graph is that there are two places you can start. You have to start, you have to think about whether you want to be a team lead, and that will be this arrow, the person who starts the consortia, who looks for all their partners, who is really the driving force of everything that happens and takes on the biggest administrative and research responsibility. Or you want to be this, you want to be a partner, you want to lead a work package, you want to lead a work task. That is the first really important question to ask yourself. And there are very different ways to go about thinking about it. Some organizations probably just don't have the capacity to lead a big project like Horizon Europe. It's many millions of euro, which is twice as many millions almost of Canadian dollars. It requires admin staff, it requires finance staff to process that amount of money. You might not be based in an organization that has the capacity. For example, many NGOs will not have the capacity to lead these proposals, and that is completely understandable. There's absolutely, it's just a wonderful opportunity to be a partner or to lead a work package. If you do have the institutional capacity, there's a lot of advice suggesting it's worth first participating in a Horizon Europe project before leading one. That's great advice, which I generally agree with, but there's a but. I also think if there is a proposal that you would be a natural lead for and you are based at an institution or a company that has a history of large projects and international collaboration, and particularly if the Horizon Europe project is a lump sum. So a lump sum involves way less to almost zero financial reporting following the project being funded, then it's perhaps worth considering leading it. However, you need to give yourself plenty of time to build this consortium, as we'll talk about it in a sec. So if you're going to join a consortium, how would you go about that? And, a lot of this isn't perhaps rocket science, but it's really worth reiterating. Contacts, all sort of contacts are absolutely invaluable if you know anyone. The advice I always give in these webinars is if you have any relationships with organizations in Europe, especially if they're a longer duration, or associated countries, right? This is the time to reach out to them just with a really quick email initially. Hi, Canada is now an associated country. I'd love to work with you on a Horizon Europe project. Are you thinking of putting in an application? And that's 3 sentences, and it can really lead to very interesting conversations. And I know for a fact it can lead to joint proposals. So that's the first thing you can do. You should think of your contacts that you have available and build on that. It's the easiest and most natural way to go about it. Any contacts in Europe and networking. If you don't necessarily have these connections, then building them. This is a great time. If you have for example, a conference to go to, and you've always gone to the conference in the US, well, perhaps now is not the time to go to the US for, all sorts of reasons, including, university teachers are actually being recommended not to go at this point officially. And it is maybe a time to consider going to Europe. There are institutions in associated countries that have separate budgets just to send people, researchers and administrators, importantly, to events in Europe so that they can network, make these connections to build on them for future applications. Matchmaking events are wonderful, wonderful opportunity. We have the NCP network in Canada. Tamara just told you about it. They organize matchmaking events regularly. It's such a great opportunity to show yourself, meet other institutions, just even get a feel for what it is that these things look like. Matchmaking events are also organized by the NCPs in Europe and the NCP network in Europe. Those are honestly great opportunities to actually build relationships that result in applications. Initially, when I started in this line of work a long time ago, I didn't think these things are supposed to work, right? You're supposed to have a human connection and you're supposed to like know people, and it's supposed to work better that way. In fact, it does work really well if you know someone, but it also works really well if you don't. There are matchmaking events in Europe that are in person, and these work. But to my initial surprise, the online matchmaking events really work as well. I know multiple projects that were seeded during online matchmaking events between people who had never seen each other before prior to the matchmaking event. So as a former skeptic, I can tell you that these things really work. I mean, it's amazing. People come into a room, they want to work together, virtual room even. They want to work together on something. They meet, they realize they have interests in common, they connect, and things happen. The magic happens. And successful proposals result from these numerous different matchmaking events. So please look into that. It is, if you start with looking at the work program, if you know there's some, well, start also with signing up to the ISA newsletter if you're not already. And if you know that there's something there in one of, and I do encourage you to look through all the work programs, even if you think that whatever it is you're doing matches one perfectly, it might surprise you. You know, you might look into a different work program and see like, oh, wow, that is actually really interesting too. So I encourage you to look through the table of contents of all the, at the very least of all the work programs, and then go to an NCP network and as well as I said, and see if there are events organized around particular calls or topics that you might fit into. It's really, it's not a lot of time, and it's worth the effort to make those connections. Now, what to watch out for? I know that sometimes organizations approach partners, ask them for upfront payments to join an application. That is a no-go. I would discourage you from doing that. That is usually not great practice. Reply to emails, and I know again very basic stuff, but this is key. Replying to emails and ensuring that people you're emailing reply to emails as well. And if they stop replying, then give them, a week or two and move on. Because these things happen. Sometimes you think you've connected with someone, you might have had a few calls with them and they just stop replying to emails. Give them a week or two and really move on. Don't keep waiting for them to get back to you, but also make sure you get back to people in a timely manner. A lot of these applications currently, because Horizon Europe covers the whole globe, it is literally, I am working now on a project that spans literally the whole globe. So just even time zones, people's different holidays, the number of people that are sometimes on an email, keeping track of who's replied, making sure you've gotten back to people, making sure they know where you're at in these larger consortia can be really key. And asking questions. I know it seems, again, all this is perhaps very obvious, but sometimes people get approached to join a consortium and they're so excited they just hop on immediately. And then 3 months down the line, they figure out that maybe this isn't actually the best fit, or they've been asked to do something they don't want to do, or they've had a different interest. Initially asking for a one-pager about the project, making sure you have basic information and your basic questions have been answered is very useful. We also realize that sometimes Canadian partners, due to just lack of experience with Horizon Europe, which again, very natural because this is a new thing in Canada, sometimes there's less negotiating on the budget side of things. That is something that, obviously we all need to be polite about things, but the expectation is you do negotiate. You're offered something, and then it is very okay to go back and ask, why this, and can we talk about that? Trust me, all European institutions and all institutions with experience with Horizon Europe negotiate budgets. Rarely is the first offer the final sum that goes into the budget. So feel free to take part in these conversations as an equal partner. Just because you're a newcomer, just because you might be joining your first consortium, does not mean you're not allowed to ask all the questions you need answered and advocate for whatever role you want to perform in this proposal and for however much money you need to complete the work you're doing, right? You definitely want the money to make sure that everything is paid for, including, if possible, through your institution payroll. That can be a real game changer. So you should give yourself the time and space and possibility to negotiate and talk to your partners about this. Leading a consortium, you'll see that a lot of the bullet points are similar. Contacts, again, really important. What's worth adding is that sometimes if someone doesn't join your consortium or can't, or they're already in a different consortium and don't want to do two consortia, they will recommend contacts. So even if you think someone is not a great fit, but it's worth reaching out just to ask if they have any other ideas. It is really the easiest thing to do is first reach out to the people you already know. Again, network. That is key. And people are interested. There are more people probably interested, to be honest, in joining consortia than leading them. Even though leading a consortium is an incredibly exciting opportunity, there are some institutions that either don't want to, some teams that don't want to, or just people who are not in a place to feel like this is what they want to do, but they're very keen to join a consortium. So institutions leading consortia are in a position often to just pick and choose who they want to work for if they put themselves out there, right? Either through matchmaking events, conferences, or just letting their network know that they are doing this and that they're looking for partners. Now, what to watch out for if you want to lead a consortium is definitely responsibility. It comes with a lot of responsibility, obviously, and not just in terms of running the project, even coordinating the application process. Again, if you think of basic things like someone needs to send out a doodle for that weekly, bi-weekly meeting the application team has. Someone has to talk with all these people in these different time zones and their different commitments and find just that part. And if you can hear a slight frustration in my voice, it's because this is sometimes literally my job, trying to figure out between literally 4 continents, when can people meet up and talk about an application, right? And just that part of the work can take up a lot of time. And I say frustrations, jokingly, of course. It's really important, but it's sometimes something we don't think about. And often, if this is just a researcher doing this, researchers are not necessarily always the people best equipped to try and figure out a time for a meeting between 4 continents, right? And setting up weekly meetings, writing agendas, making sure that things get ticked off, because this is what a Horizon Europe application often is, making sure you regularly meet, discuss documents, everyone comments, and then it takes time to even get to the place where you're looking at the actual application template. So making sure you have support with that and can bear that responsibility, whether that is someone on your team or whether someone from your institution's administration can provide you support with that, just coordinating that part can be a part-time job at the very least. So you need to be ready for that, because it's not just about leading that proposal when it gets funded. Leading the project. It's about leading the application process as well. Again, reply to emails and ask questions, particularly if you're going to be responsible for it in the very end. You want to encourage discussion, and you want to encourage people stating clearly what their expectations and roles are for how they see themselves in the project. And that is, the earlier the better. We have a bunch of deadlines in April. That is going to be stressful, but for September, for the September deadlines, this is such a good time to have those conversations, right? We have 6 months effectively, because then the summer comes and people are mostly gone, especially in parts of Europe. So there's 6 months, and now such a good time to make sure everyone who is considering an application, talking about it, has similar or goals that are complementary, and their expectations for what they will do in the proposal or project align. That is really important. For example, some people really want to lead a work package, some really don't. You want to make sure that there's not too many of each. For example, if everyone wants to lead a work package, then that's probably not possible. If no one wants to lead a work package, then you're also in trouble. So just having those conversations early on is important. In terms of steps you can take immediately, is reach out to contacts in Europe. Like I said, reach out to NCPs in Canada and Europe. There's such a wide network of very knowledgeable people who are eager to help you. It's literally their job. A lot of European NCPs, I'm afraid I'm not quite sure how this works in Canada in terms of internal reporting, but they are actually evaluated based on the number of connections they make between their country institutions in their country and institutions in other countries, not necessarily even on the number of proposals submitted, but just initial connections. So you're doing them a favor, reaching out to them and saying what you're interested in. Don't limit your options. I know, the EU is a lot of countries. I mean, compared to Canada, it's not even that big a landmass, but it is a lot of countries. And there are some countries that you might not have really considered previously for collaboration. I would encourage you to look into countries you maybe haven't considered. There are amazing institutions in every single EU country, and there are people who do maybe in your particular field, amazing work in a country you haven't thought of before. So it's worth looking further than maybe what seemed obvious initially. So not limiting yourself, but also not limiting, not just geographically, but also in terms of applications and calls. You might think that there's a particular call or topic, as they're called in the work programs, that is a perfect fit. And if you're talking to possible partners, if you're talking to NCPs, if you tell them this is the only call you're interested in, they will take your word for it. And they will only talk to other people on behalf of you about that one call. And I would encourage you to not limit yourself that way, because usually there are more calls you could partner on. And it's worth just jotting down at least 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you're going to talk to an NCP, if you're talking to partners in Europe, giving them more than just that one call, because you're giving them more room to find partners, to find options to work together. And if possible, this is important, and I know resources are limited, but if you can assign a team member who actually does Horizon Europe, if you're thinking seriously of applying and are looking to build consortia or join them, if there can be a person who's at least actual part-time job this is, because it is a job. It takes time, it takes an effort. And doing this off the side of your desk is not always going to be successful. So if there's someone who you can assign, or you can get someone's time to help you with this, that is incredibly useful. And I encourage you to try to get that if possible. So how to build that consortium? It is a balancing act. At the end of the day, to be absolutely honest with you, it always is a balancing act between who we know and what we need, right? We've got that owl here. I'm trying to be, trying to guide us to be wise about it. Because, sometimes at the end of the day, you get what you get. You have the people you have for all sorts of reasons. Either these are the people the people you had connections to, the people you met in matchmaking events, or the people who eventually replied to all your emails, right? And it can be a fine balancing act. And the topic description should be always your guide. That is, your starting point and your end point. And it is the thing that should guide how you build the consortium. And what's important is to not be afraid to identify the missing piece, because I guarantee you the evaluators will. So you've assembled a team, and this happens so often, right? In my experience, that there's a team of people who vaguely or less vaguely know each other. That's often the case. And they're realizing that there's one, this part of the topic description just isn't covered. And realizing that, and then brainstorming how you can find that, either through a matchmaking event or through reaching out to connections or NCPs, and asking for help in finding someone for that particular part of your application, is the recommended way to go. I'll be very clear about that, because If you can see that you're missing something, I can guarantee you 100% the evaluators will spot that immediately and you will not get funded. So you want to assemble your team and then really go through it and see who it is you're missing and find your unique selling point. Think about what it is. I mean, we know the numbers, or if you don't, here they are. The success rate for Horizon Europe is 12 to 20%, averaging around 16, right? Those are, from an applicant's point of view, those can be pretty scary numbers, right? So you need to find that unique thing about you. There's going to be 10 other applications to get funded, right? So what it is that will make evaluators look at your application and be like, yes, these folks are the best people for this. How, they've put together this amazing team. Everything fits perfectly. They have a really good idea. I like this. This is you want to give off that impression immediately. And it's important, in order to do that, to think about how your consortium is unique and why that uniqueness means it is the best possible team to solve this particular problem or challenge as stated in the topic, right? Always, in terms of thinking of that missing piece, thinking back to papers and conferences, I know this seems obvious, but and you might feel like you're cold calling someone, and maybe you are cold calling someone or cold emailing. But if you reach out and say, "Hey, I know about your work from this paper or this conference. We haven't talked, but I'm putting together a consortium for this application, and we think you'd be a great fit. Do you want to talk? Would you be willing to jump on a quick call?" That you honestly would be surprised how successful that is. In my own experience, where we've gotten to a place where there is, the foundation of a consortium, or we've got the organizations. It's usually, we've got 4 to 6 organizations that are committed, and we're realizing we need more. And sending out an email like that, very targeted, very specific, citing that person's work, saying which particular call it is we're looking at and linking to that call, making it easy for that person to go look at it and explaining why they're a good fit in just a few sentences, right? Especially if you don't know these people, you don't want to overwhelm them initially. That is, 80% of the time, I would say, I have found that people will at the very least happily jump on a call. Because again, you're approaching them with a very specific ask around Horizon Europe. And if you're approaching people in EU or associated countries, they know you're basically saying, listen, we might be able to have a lot of money to work together on a thing you're good at. Do you want to talk? And people usually do want to talk about that. So that is sort of the tips coming from years of experience on how to look at this. And if you already have those partners, right? There's a few of you. There's initially, a core team can be anything from 2 to 4 organizations usually. And you're thinking, you already work with these people, so you have your network in Europe, right? You've reached out to your closest colleagues, and there's a few of you, there's 4 organizations, representatives from 4 organizations maybe, and you're thinking of a call. You might not know which one even, or you might have picked a call and you want to work together. Then how do you go about it from there? Team meetings. And again, I apologize to those of you for whom this is absolutely obvious, but this is what breaks a lot of projects initially, especially, a lot of you are based in Canada, and some of you are based on the East Coast, and some of you might be based on the Pacific Coast, and your time difference between Europe is, almost a day, right? So how do you schedule that? How do you get people into a even virtual remote room together? This is really important, especially those initial meetings, because the way this usually works is you need to get to know each other. You need to have a few conversations. A lot of the work later can happen asynchronously once you're working on documents, but it's very hard to get to a place where you're thinking of an actual consortium and actually working with people without having talked to them. I want to say face-to-face. What I mean is monitor to monitor, right? So finding that there are projects I'm working on, which literally there is a single time slot that works for everyone on the project, kind of works for everyone on the project, right? Because someone is getting up really early in the morning and someone's staying up later than they'd like in the office. but it's the only thing we can find. And, that's scheduled every 2 weeks, that 1 hour is scheduled. And we found that time slot, and people have worked it around, there's childcare, there's life, there's everything. And it takes time often, especially, if you're the further west you are in Canada, this will possibly be more of a problem, because just that there isn't that much time in the workday that you have left between you and partners, say in Europe, right? Or if you're working with, New Zealand or countries in Asia, that's even more exciting in terms of trying to get that all done. So think about that and make sure you actually find a time that works for people, that you can meet up at least 2-3 times to talk face to face before you start working asynchronously. This is key. I mean, I don't know of a project, honestly, that succeeded without this. You need to get people in a room talking, bouncing ideas, and then deciding that they're comfortable with what they've come up with. These things don't happen as well through email. But then there's asynchronous work, right? Where you're working on a document, there has to be a lead on this. And this is absolutely key. It is usually the project lead, right? The consortium lead will be the person who leads on initially writing these documents, but there needs to be a person who in these calls, at the end of the call, will say, I will write these documents. Please comment on them by this day. And this gets repeated in an email. Because again, otherwise, people are super busy. It feels like September, for example, for the deadline is months away. I have all these other things to do. I can't do this now. But the thing is, if you don't start doing this now, it will not get done. So making sure that a lead is either looking into this or has someone coordinating them for them and following up with people, very important. Sometimes people will cancel. I literally just this morning, I got up for a call earlier than I would have liked to open my email and see that the partner who was based in Asia had to cancel for reasons, right? So this happens. You need to know it happens, and this will also make your timeline and your work that much more complicated. So build in room for all that scheduling and life, and make sure people keep talking and documents keep being circulated. And prepare the project outline sooner than later. I mean, have these conversations, and then within a month of talking with people, there should be at least a 1 to 2 pager of a project outline, and then download templates. And there are new templates. This is important. They've been put out this month, I think, or maybe late December. As the ambassador has said, that they are easier to deal with, less prescriptive. So make sure you have the latest templates. Don't use the ones that we might have talked about when we started these webinars, because that is just, at the time, they were the relevant templates. They are no longer the relevant templates. So please download them off the tenders and funding portal. Remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. I mean, literally deadlines are in September, and I have projects I've been working on since December on those. You assume it's going to take time. Please, rarely if you have 3 months, that is the bare minimum. I think it's honestly, personal opinion is that is too little for a Horizon Europe. Give yourself 6 months and assume it's not 6 months because you're not doing the work. It's 6 months because you are working for 6 months, right? So give yourself that time. Make sure your file management system is in place. Again, I apologize to those of you for whom this is obvious, but if you're, again, working, different institutions have different policies on this. You're probably working over at least, at the very minimum, 2 continents, multiple institutions. Find a file management system that everyone has access to and that works for everyone, and there isn't a firewall or there isn't something that makes it impossible for them to access it. And make sure that everyone knows where the things are in the folder and what is the latest version of the things they're working at. Don't leave submission till the last minute. That is just something I always remind people. You can resubmit on the tenders and portal website as many times as you like. So instead of saving, you can submit it. And then, when you submit it again next time, it will overwrite your previous version. And that way, that whatever happens, you have submitted something, even if your internet dies, the hour before the deadline, there has been something that was submitted. You need to have an application coordinator, which is not necessarily the same thing as the application research lead. I want to be clear on that those can, and I often suggest that these are different roles. Because the coordinator is the person who hassles people over filling out doodles, and the application research lead is the person making sure that there's a really good one-pager. Rarely do people have time to do both of these things equally well. So I encourage you to consider splitting those roles. And I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you. I'll stop sharing my screen. I think perfect timing.
You, Maria.
I again promised to do my best not to go over. I'm glad I didn't. So thank you.
Yeah, you didn't. You flew through this, and me and Josh were flying through the questions and answers. We answered 62 questions.
Oh my gosh.
In 1 hour. So Josh is still on it. However, there will be some, and Josh, I wanted, actually, if you could maybe, when you stop typing, maybe you would like to go on the camera as well, because there are some questions for you, Maria, actually, that I think you can answer. Mm-hmm. And let me see, because, okay, so first of all, about your presentation, where can we find the templates Maria mentioned? Thank you.
The tenders and funding portal. If you don't have an account there yet, please get yourself one. It's an experience, the funding and tenders portal, and it's worth finding your way around it sooner than later. And it is the place where you can download all the templates.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull the link to this. Okay, so I will put it here for everyone to see. It's there. Then. I don't know. There are questions for Josh, for ISET, because you have more understanding of the success rate, most probably, of the Canadian institutions. Would you like to tackle these questions live?
Yeah, Agnieszka, I'm happy to take that on. So we're still currently working to consolidate the data. So especially even within the 2025 cycle, right? Like people are just getting their outcomes now. So we're just getting that data now. So once we have a more concrete understanding of those numbers, we're going to share them out with our stakeholders too. So I would say it's still too early. We know that people are winning, right? And in the same way as well, as Maria has pointed out, this is also a very competitive program. So we're working to understand those nuances within the data, but are also still waiting for that data to really come in. So once it's there, we'll let you know.
It's really, we are actually all waiting for this data. So I'm sure that probably at the next webinar, we will be able to maybe share something next month, because the first wave of results came back, I think, after Christmas. But, we always say you didn't win until you signed the grant agreement. And this can take at least 2 months, to close all the administrative procedures. Okay. Thank you, Josh. Maria, there is a question about the budget that I would like you to answer. Could you share an average budget for a Horizon Europe consortium? Is there a minimum budget for that?
That's a great question. If you look at the work, if you look at the topic description, the European Commission tells you what they think your budget should be. The average number is around 4.5 million euro, but that's an average. We all know the problems of averages, right? The European Commission tells you how much they think you should budget for in this proposal, and it's in the topic description. So you just go look at that. It's not a guessing game.
Okay, another question is about the disadvantages of being from associated countries versus EU member states. For example, will some EU researchers not want to work with Canadians for some reasons? Yeah, use
Yeah, no,
right.
there's no disadvantage to being an associated country. What's more, people are honestly very excited to work with Canadians. I was literally in Brussels last week. People are beyond excited, and to me, it's kind of funny. People like Europeans are still scared of polar bears, and they will ask me about polar bears, and I will be like, most Canadians will live and die never having seen a polar bear, and once they fear there are no polar bears, they are just beyond excited to work with Canadians. It's really, there's excellence in research here. Canada has great international PR. Really, North, East, South, West Europe is excited to work with Canada. It's an open door you're walking through. There are no disadvantages.
Yep. Agnesha, I'll also just add, I think we see this a lot with the way that we do matchmaking events. So we've been able to work across Europe and find different partners internationally as well. So there's quite a bit of enthusiasm to work with the Canadians and vice versa. So that's one thing that we're working to do more of in the next couple of months. So please stay tuned and sign up to our distribution list.
Please do. I wanted to ask you, Josh or Maria, would you like to take on the question about European Innovation Council funding? Do Canadian companies qualify for that funding, given that EIC appears to cover countries associated with Horizon Europe? Anyone wants to answer that?
I can start, largely because this is something that we always get questions on. So I'll just start with saying that Canada associated to Pillar 2 of Horizon Europe. There's 3 different pillars in Horizon Europe. So EIC falls under Pillar 3. So there are only specific programs in Pillar 3, which Canada definitely has or at least has good access to funding. That's the EIC Pathfinder Open. But if people have more questions, let us know, because there's some exceptions, but in general, for the most part, like Pillar 3 tends to be excluded in terms of Canadian participation, largely because we're not associated to it.
Thank you. And I always, underline that Canadians can participate in Pillar 1 too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's really important because we seem to forget that, and it has been the case, for years now. So.
Yeah. Agnesha, I'll just add, the MSCA has been a really fantastic opportunity for Canadians. This is also true, for example, the ERC grants, like the ERC synergy grants have been one of interest for Canadians, and where Canadians have found quite a bit of success as well. So.
Yes, so please remember that this is important. So I think we answered the question about Pillar 3, that there's a question, how does one sign up for the distribution list? But I think, Josh, you shared the link, right?
Yeah, I sent the link in the chat, so feel free to just access them through the chat. And it's a matter of just providing your email so that we have it. So we're able to send you regular updates. We have a quarterly newsletter. So the next one is due for March, but we do provide ad hoc updates as well. So as I mentioned, I think last week we sent out a list of upcoming matchmaking events, but also information sessions like this one, but also those that are offered by the European Commission. So yeah, just register and we're happy to provide information there.
Maria, would you like to take on a very specific question about the use of data, the patient data? Because
yes, happily do that. It is a very specific question, and I am happy to say it depends on the project. There are quite a few questions here that I feel the answer really is it depends on the project. Technically, of course, you could just use patient data from just one country if that makes sense for the project. Although rarely in a medical project does it make sense to limit the amount of patient data you have, right? For all sorts of reasons, it usually makes sense to have as much patient data from as many locations as possible as makes sense for the project and the budget. So this is a question I was literally discussing. This is one of the questions I was discussing in Belgium last week, where there are some concerns about, GDPR and sensitive data. There are ways to deal with that, all sorts of mechanisms that the EU and its partners look into EOSC, for example. There are ways to deal with that. Generally, it is technically possible to use data only from Canada. I don't think it is usually the best option for any project to do that, especially patient data. If you're looking at icebergs, then probably you can use just Canadian data, because if your partners are from Spain and Italy, they have zero iceberg data of their own, right? But patient data is usually going to be, you're going to want more than less. Thank you.
Thank you. So is there any other question here that you think you could answer? Because I'm thinking maybe what is interesting is to talk a little bit about the difference between the SHRC emphasis on the involvement of students. This is the question from Harriet. And not on infrastructure. Are there any particular emphasis within the Horizon grant that we should understand?
Is that for me?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, okay. So there is an emphasis on people as well, but not so much on, I mean, you are supposed to train people in Horizon Europe projects, and there is less of an emphasis on infrastructure. You're not supposed to buy infrastructure anymore, really. I mean, small infrastructure, yes, but big infrastructure, you're not supposed to be spending money on it anymore. There are mechanisms to pay for using it, but most of these projects are no longer projects for buying big, expensive research toys, right? They are projects on conducting research and using big, expensive research toys. So it's less of just researchers, just graduates or young researchers. It's more of a supporting the research ecosystem to meet these challenges, I think would be the way of framing it.
Okay. I can see that Josh is writing the answer that I wanted him to talk about.
Agnieszka, I can also do it. I can do it on air too. I think it's important.
Yeah.
So a good chunk of the work with the national contact points is really they're the dedicated support system to help Canadians navigate the program. So they can help you find partners, really get into understanding the opportunities within the work programs as well. One of the key thing that I wanted to also mention is that those national contact points have a good understanding of the program because they attend the program committee meetings, but also have developed a strong network with their European and international national contact point counterparts. So we have relied on them quite a bit to also help navigate the more technical and administrative components of the program. So especially if, let's say, you've entered the second stage portion of the applications, or maybe you're now closer to the grant agreement signing or signature, we tend to kind of be able to kind of help you through that as well. So if you have more questions, please let us know, and we're happy to kind of also, take them up on our inbox too. So
lovely. Thank you. I think that we only have then very general questions, really, of very particular as well. I think that there is a question about the deadline for the pitch deck. I think that was probably the matchmaking event that you, Josh, probably organized. Could you answer this?
I'm not too sure if it's specifically to one to us. So, but I would just suggest that they just reach out to the organizers just to see if there's still an opportunity. But yeah, if it's with us, feel free to reach out to our inbox, Horizon Europe at isd.gc.ca, and we're happy to help there. Actually, the one part that I think I'd like to take up is that question on the timelines. The timelines for a lot of these calls, to be honest, are already established in terms of when they open and when they close. And a lot of the questions, for example, that we were answering on the chat, I tend to kind of reference the Horizon Europe work programs, which I linked as well, generally within the chat, because it tells you when these projects open for your submission and when they close, but also all the details about like what kind of projects are they looking for, what is the scope, what kind of partnerships they're looking for. So I would suggest that people take a look at those work programs, try to find the opportunity there, and you'll have a much easier time trying to find partners that way as well.
Yeah. Maria, would you like to talk about the digital humanities question?
Yes, I realize there's a cost associated with technology and, for example, right, space, and that is a different cost than buying. Paying for infrastructure is different than buying infrastructure, and Horizon Europe grants are usually better with covering existing infrastructure that you want to use, like for example, server space, then necessarily. And I realize that it's a complicated conversation because you usually want to own the server. It's hard to get in with. I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but in general, it is worth looking into it. There's definitely, if it's a project that needs AI and space, there will be room in the budget for it. I guarantee you.
Yes, this is what I really want to underline, because when we are thinking about projects outside of humanities, right? In the engineering space, for example, there is a possibility to fund whatever needs to be funded, right, to make the project happen. So there is a flexibility there. Okay, so we answered that one. I think that we are getting to close. I don't know if there are any questions that you really feel like you have to answer that are clear to you. I think that we have, about the commercial partners.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's definitely a good idea, especially you want to show impact and you want to show the ability to translate from an idea into a product, and commercial partners are great with that because literally their jobs, having real life things that are available to customers. So that is definitely an advantage. And currently, almost a quarter of the beneficiaries of Horizon Europe funds are SMEs. So it's definitely recommended.
Okay, and then I think that I don't know about the question about not being able to receiving funds. I didn't hear it in your presentation. So, but there is one last question about the funding opportunities and matching funds. I think you explained that really. This is not necessarily the case unless you are for profit, right?
Yes.
Okay, listen, I think that we are done here. We had almost 90 questions we answered. Thank you, Josh. I think we have to do it more often. And now I would like to thank Maria for her engaging talk, as always. I think we learned a lot. And this is the time where I invite Konstantinos Kapsoropoulos, the scientific counselor from the European Union delegation to Canada, to close this meeting.
Thank you, Agnieszka. Thank you, everybody who participated to today's webinar. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, you can hear me very well. It's always a pleasure to attend this webinar. First of all, because I see the excitement of people. Secondly, and as a European, to confirm that we don't see polar bears in Ottawa every day, but mostly to say that also as European, being many times in Brussels and Europe, there is a lot of excitement to work since the beginning of the Association of Canada to Horizon Europe, to work together with Canadian researchers and companies. And the proof of that is really all the attendees in all our webinars, all the questions that we have received. So that proves exactly the appetite and even more the excitement to work together. And in the 1 year that I have been doing this job here in Canada, we have seen also results, and we can see also success stories of Canadian participation to Horizon Europe projects. So that's very encouraging, because we see that the work that we are all doing, that the EU delegation, that the ISED is very much doing, that we are all doing as a team, in a team spirit, brings up some fruit, and that encourages to do more. Another thing that I would like to mention before finishing is that I heard very clear, and I was very glad about that, about the differentiation of the 3 pillars of Horizon Europe. It's very, very important and useful to mention them every time. Pillar 1 about mobility, Pillar 2 where Canada is associated with, about global challenges, and Pillar 3 about startups. And I was very, very glad to hear about the role of the European Innovation Council. I would like to say that one of my priorities priorities for the next months is also to work a bit of how to make the opportunities that the European Innovation Council can bring forward more known to Canadian researchers, and companies and startups, of course. Although Canada is not associated, there are still opportunities there, and a lot of opportunities to help our startups scale up. So I would like then to close this webinar by saying thank you to all. There will be 2 other webinars, one in February and the other in March, as our ambassador announced in the beginning. And of course, I'm very, very much looking forward to the roadshow that we are going to repeat all over Canada in specific places that will be communicated to you soon, because of course, webinars are very useful, but it's very different to have all of you in person. To see really the excitement and also the results and the questions. So more to come. And more information to come about these events will come soon. Thank you very much on behalf of the European Union delegation. Very happy to be in this first webinar for the new Horizon Europe program, and very happy to close it and say hello and good day to everybody. Thank you all.
And please remember to fill in our survey at the end.
We need your feedback. Thank you very much for reminding that, Agnieszka.